All right, family, gather round. We've all got that one person, right? The one who looks at you and decides you're not enough before you've even said a word. Now imagine that person is your mother-in-law, and she's got the bank account of a small country to back up every single one of her nasty opinions. We're talking about a level of shady that needs its own solar system. That's the cold reality our girl Anna walked into. She thought she'd left her high stakes, cutthroat past behind for a little peace and quiet. But this new villain was about to learn a brutal, unforgiving lesson. You do not bring a butter knife to a tactical nuke fight. This isn't a story about screaming matches. This is a masterclass in quiet, calculated, elegant revenge. It's about how the sweetest payback isn't screamed from the rooftops. It's whispered in a room full of powerful people, and it echoes for a lifetime. If you know what it's like to be looked down on, to be made to feel like you're less than, then you are in the right place. You are going to want to see how this goes down. So do us a solid asterisk, smash that subscribe button, and ring the notification bell asterisk so you don't miss a single part of this epic takedown. Let's get into it. The GPS on my phone blinked off as we turned onto Sycamore Lane, as if even the satellite signal was too intimidated to follow. The trees lining the driveway were too perfect, like soldiers standing at rigid attention, their branches meticulously pruned to form a flawless green canopy overhead. My trusty, decade-old Honda Civic, with its faint smell of coffee and its passenger seat littered with event planning binders, coughed a little as I eased it to a stop behind a line of vehicles that cost more than my entire college education. Each one was a silent, gleaming judgment. Chad reached over from the passenger seat and squeezed my hand. His hand was warm, solid, familiar. Hey, breathe. It's just a big, stuffy old house, full of even stuffier people. They don't bite much. I forced a smile, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Says the man who was born in this stuffy old house, I countered, my voice tighter than I intended. He grinned, that easy, lopsided grin that had made me fall for him in the first place. Born in the East Wing, actually. The delivery room had better wallpaper. And then I saw her, standing at the top of the marble steps, as still and poised as a statue, was Eleanor Vanderbilt. She was a vision in cream-colored linen, her silver blonde hair cut in a severe, perfect bob that didn't dare move in the gentle breeze. Her smile was a thin, practiced line, and it didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes, they were the color of a bank vault door, cool, impenetrable, and designed to keep things like me out. "Darling," she said, her voice the auditory equivalent of chilled champagne. She leaned in, presenting a perfumed cheek for Chad to air-kiss. Then, those vault door eyes swiveled and locked onto me. It was a full systems diagnostic, a ruthless appraisal that started at my practical, low-heeled pumps and traveled up, pausing dismissively on my simple pearl studs and finally landing on my face. I felt stripped bare, found wanting in every conceivable way. "And you must be Anna." The words were neutral, but the tone was an accusation. "You are the one, Mrs. Vanderbilt," I said, my voice thankfully steady. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you. Chad talks about you all the time." "Does he?" she replied, her smile a razor blade. "I'm sure he's been selective." With that, she deftly looped her arm through Chad's, claiming him, and turned to lead him into the house. I was left to follow, an afterthought, a ghost in my own introduction. The next 2 hours were a masterclass in subtle aggression. We were seated on a patio, overlooking a manicured garden that belonged in a magazine. A silent woman in a uniform served us tea, in cups so delicate I was afraid I'd crush them. The conversation was a minefield. "An event coordinator," Eleanor mused, placing her cup back on its saucer without a sound. "How hands-on. It must be so rewarding to bring other people's visions to life." The pause before hands-on was a masterpiece of condescension. She made it sound like I was a hired mover. "It can be chaotic, but I love it," I said, clinging to my politeness like a life raft. "There's a real art to managing the details." "Details," she echoed, as if it were a foreign word. "Yes, I suppose so. And your family is in Ohio, was it? Manufacturing?" She said the word manufacturing, with a faint wrinkling of her nose, as if she just smelled something unpleasant. "My father runs an auto parts supply store," I clarified, my knuckles white where I gripped my knees under the table. "He built it from the ground up. That's the backbone of America, Mom." Chad chimed in, his voice cheerful but with a steel edge I knew was meant solely for her. He winked at me, a tiny gesture of solidarity. Eleanor's smile didn't falter. "Of course it is, dear. The very spine." She turned her glacial gaze back to me. "We must find a way to get you a more sophisticated wardrobe, Anna. First impressions are so important in our world. I know a wonderful personal shopper at Saks. That was the opening move. The wedding planning was a full-scale war. She tried to veto my chosen dress. A bit simple, don't you think? It lacks statement. My bouquet. Wildflowers are charming in a field, dear. But for a cathedral, we need orchids. And most egregiously, my guest list. Your family's vibrant energy is so refreshing, she'd said during one torturous planning session. But perhaps we can seat them nearer the kitchen? It will feel more intimate for them. Each time, Chad was my knight in a bespoke suit. It's our day, Mom. Back off. She's carrying wildflowers. End of story. Her family sits with us, at the front. I loved him fiercely for it, for every time he stood between me and her venom. We thought moving into our own home, a stunning 3-story brownstone Chad had surprised me with, would be our sanctuary. We were wrong. Eleanor had a key for emergencies. Her emergencies included popping by when we were out to rearrange my kitchen cabinets. The feng shui was all wrong, darling. The positive energy was stuck, replacing my bright, colorful abstract art with muted, expensive landscapes. A bit more serene, don't you think? And once, leaving a book on the coffee table titled *Etiquette for the Modern Hostess*, with a post-it note on a chapter about dressing for dinner even at home. I let it slide. For Chad, I had left my old life behind for a reason. I had been Anna Petrocelli, a name that could clear a boardroom and send a shiver down the spine of a Fortune 500 CEO. I was a corporate litigator, a barracuda in a Brooks Brothers suit, a woman who specialized in forensic accounting and the systematic destruction of liars. But that life was a desert. It had drained me, turned me into a weapon, and I was tired of the fight. I'd traded my 6-figure salary and my power suits for a job that brought me joy and a man who brought me peace. I loved Chad enough to swallow the daily dose of poison his mother served. I was building a new, quiet life, brick by patient brick. But peace, I was slowly, painfully learning, was a luxury Eleanor Vanderbilt would never allow. She wasn't just trying to put me in my place. She was trying to erase me and build a more suitable version in my stead. And the thing about trying to erase someone, sometimes you awaken the very thing they've been trying to forget. The Vanderbilt annual summer gala was the crown jewel of Eleanor's social calendar. It was more than a party. It was a statement of power, a reaffirmation of the Vanderbilt place in the firmament. The Newport mansion was transformed into a whirl of crystal, flowers, and the low-moneyed hum of 200 of the East Coast's most important people. I felt like a zoo animal in a couture enclosure, my simple black cocktail dress feeling increasingly like a costume that didn't fit. I was trapped in a conversation with a woman named Bitsy, whose diamond necklace was so heavy-looking I wondered how she held her head up. She was droning on about the plight of the rare Peruvian orchid when Eleanor materialized beside us, a vision in sapphire blue silk. "Ladies, you'll have to excuse us," she said, her voice dripping with saccharine sweetness. She laid a perfectly manicured hand on my arm, her touch feeling like ice. "I need to borrow my daughter-in-law for a moment. There's a situation in the kitchen that requires a more practical touch." Bitsy and her friends tittered behind their champagne flutes, their eyes gleaming with malicious understanding. My cheeks burned with a humiliation so acute I could taste it, metallic and sharp, at the back of my throat. Practical touch. She might as well have called me the help to my face. She didn't lead me toward the kitchen. Instead, she steered me into a secluded alcove, lined with books that had probably never been read. The smile dropped from her face like a stone. "Honestly, Anna," she sighed, the feigned concern in her voice as fake as the tan on the socialites outside. "You have to try harder. That story about your father's little shop was quaint, but it's not exactly gala talk." She leaned in closer, her whisper like a serpent's hiss. "These people don't care about spark plugs and transmission fluid. They care about bloodlines and stock portfolios. Just smile and nod, darling. It's what you're best at." I felt it then, a tectonic shift deep within me. The old Anna, the fighter, the one who had torn apart billionaires on the witness stand, stirred from her long slumber. My fingers curled into fists at my sides, my short nails digging into my palms. I looked over Eleanor's shoulder and saw Chad across the crowded room, his head thrown back in a genuine laugh, surrounded by his cousins. He looked so happy, so unburdened. He was my peace. I couldn't be the one to shatter it. Not here. Not like this. I took a slow, deliberate breath, unclenching my fists. I met her cold, triumphant gaze, and I gave her a small, placid smile. "Of course, Eleanor," I said, my voice dangerously, deceptively calm. "Whatever you say." She patted my arm, a queen bestowing grace upon a peasant. "That's a good girl." She swept away, believing she had won another round. She had no idea she had just signed her own social death warrant. She was so busy trying to bury the girl from Ohio, she didn't stop to wonder what that girl had to do to claw her way out. She forgot that the quiet ones aren't always weak. Sometimes, we're just biding our time, gathering evidence, and loading the gun. The kitchen situation was a turning point. A line crossed in the sand that was now irrevocably erased. Chad knew it too. The ride home was silent, the air in the car thick with unsaid things. "Babe," he finally said, his voice heavy as he pulled into our garage. "I am so sorry. I saw her corner you. I should have, I don't know, done something." "It's not your fault," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "But Chad, her ways aren't just set in her ways. They're toxic. She treats me like I'm a stain on the family linen she can't quite scrub out." "I know, I see it, I do." He ran a hand through his perfectly messy hair, a gesture of pure frustration. "Look, the annual Family Foundation dinner is next month. It's the biggest night of the year for her. All the trustees, the major donors, the press. It's her Super Bowl. Just get through that with me. Be the bigger person one more time. And I promise you, after that, I will handle her. I'll have a talk with her. A real one." I wanted to believe him. I loved him, and I believed he meant it. But handling Eleanor was like trying to stop a hurricane with a polite request. It was a force of nature, and it had to be met with an equal and opposite force. A week later, the first real bomb detonated. I was having a blissfully normal lunch with Sarah, my old law school roommate, and the only person on earth who knew the full, unvarnished truth of my past life. We were laughing about a crazy client she was dealing with when my phone started vibrating on the table, then didn't stop. It was a cascade of pings, dings, and buzzes. Instagram notifications, Twitter DMs, text messages. My stomach dropped. Sarah's smile faded as she saw the color drain from my face. "Anna, what is it?" With trembling fingers, I opened a link a cousin had sent me. It was from a vile high society gossip blog called Gilded Gossip. The headline made the world tilt on its axis. "Cinderella Story, OR Gold Digger Gambit. The humble and tarnished beginnings of the newest Vanderbilt." There, in high-resolution glory, were pictures of my past. A photo of my dad's auto shop, the Petrocelli Auto Parts sign, slightly faded but proud. A shot of my mom's modest, vinyl-sided house in the suburbs, with her prized rose bush in the front. And right in the middle, a grainy, candid photo of me from my sophomore year of college, looking exhausted and overwhelmed, my hair tied back in a messy ponytail, carrying a heavy stack of trays at the Griddle Me This diner. The caption beneath it was a masterpiece of character assassination. Anna Petrocelli, now cozy in the multi-million-dollar Vanderbilt brownstone, was once just another struggling co-ed serving up pancakes and other things? One has to wonder what her real recipe for locking down an heir was. Asterisk. The article was filled with a source close to the family insights. Little, intimate, cutting details about my social awkwardness, my unfortunate fashion choices, and my determined climb up the social ladder. It was a public evisceration, a digital stoning. And the source wasn't just hard to guess. It was a goddamn neon sign pointing directly to Eleanor. I felt dizzy, nauseous. This wasn't a private dig anymore. This was scorched earth. Chad was apoplectic. He stormed out of the house, his face a thundercloud, and drove straight to his mother's. I begged him not to, knowing it would only give her more ammunition, but he was a man possessed, a knight defending his queen. He returned an hour later, his shoulders slumped, his face ashen. "She denied it, of course," he said, his voice hollow. He slumped onto the sofa, not looking at me. Said it was tacky, and beneath her. She was actually crying, Anna. Crying. She said she would never. And then, he trailed off, running a hand over his face. "And then what, Chad?" He finally looked at me, his eyes full of a confused, pained loyalty. She said that maybe you had enemies from your past life. People you'd crossed. That maybe this was coming from your side of the fence, not hers. The audacity. The sheer fucking audacity of it. She was not only trying to publicly ruin my present, but was actively poisoning the well of my past, trying to drive a wedge of suspicion between me and my own husband. She was telling him I had a secret, dangerous history he knew nothing about. That was the moment. The final thread of my patience, my peace, my desire to be the bigger person, snapped with an almost audible twang. The peaceful Anna, the event coordinator, the forgiving wife, she checked out. The barracuda smelled blood in the water and began to circle. I didn't say a word to Chad. I didn't scream or cry. I just got to work. I waited until he'd gone to his home office, and then I picked up my phone. I called the one person who would understand. Sarah answered on the first ring. I saw it. That bitch. What's the play, counselor? I looked out the window of my beautiful, gilded cage, my voice dropping into a low, steady tone I hadn't used in years. It was my courtroom voice. My weapon. It's time to go digging, Sarah. Deep. You mean we're finally taking the gloves off? She asked, her voice giddy with a fierce, loyal anticipation. No, I said, a cold, hard smile finally touching my lips for the first time all day. We're not taking the gloves off. We're putting on the brass knuckles. We're going to find every single skeleton in that woman's custom-built closet, and we're going to build a whole new cemetery with them. While Eleanor was busy playing her little social media games, she had made a fatal, catastrophic error. She assumed my past was a weakness, a shameful secret to be hidden. She didn't realize it was an arsenal. I spent the next few weeks in a state of quiet, focused fury. I used skills I hadn't touched in years, accessing databases I still had the passwords for, calling in favors from old private investigator contacts and forensic accountants who owed me their careers. I wasn't just looking for dirt. I was looking for a pattern, a specific, elegant, and utterly undeniable pattern of financial malfeasance tied directly to the Vanderbilt Family Foundation, Eleanor's pride and joy. I was building a case, not for a court of law, but for the court of public opinion, and more importantly, the court of family opinion. The night of the foundation dinner arrived. I stood in front of my full-length mirror and didn't see a scared daughter-in-law. I saw a litigator. I put on a severe black Alexander McQueen dress that screamed power and consequence, not party. I pulled my hair back into a tight, low chignon. My makeup was minimal. My jewelry a single, sharp diamond stiletto necklace, a gift I'd bought myself after winning my first major case. Chad looked handsome in his tuxedo, but nervous. You okay? You seem different. I walked over to him, straightened his bow tie, and kissed his cheek. I'm just done playing defense, honey. He searched my eyes, seeing a glint of the woman he'd never met, and a flicker of unease crossed his face. Okay, let's just get through this. The dinner was held in the grand ballroom of a museum the Vanderbilts had basically built. It was a sea of white linen, glittering crystal, and the self-satisfied smiles of the ultra-wealthy. Eleanor was in her element, holding court at the head table, radiant in a gown of crimson silk, the color of fresh blood. She saw me, and her eyes swept over my stark, powerful ensemble. A flicker of surprise, then disdain, crossed her features. She gave me a little condescending wave, as if to say, asterisk, you tried, dear. She thought she had won. She thought the blog post had broken me, and my severe outfit was a pathetic attempt at defiance. As the main course was cleared and coffee was served, the chairman of the foundation, a portly man named Charles, stood up to give a speech. He droned on about the Vanderbilt legacy, about philanthropy, about the good works they did. And then, as was tradition, he invited Eleanor, the foundation's heart and soul, to say a few words. She glided to the podium, a vision of old money elegance and absolute authority. The room fell into a respectful silence. Thank you, Charles, she began, her voice amplified, clear, and dripping with false humility. As you all know, the foundation is my life's work. It's built on a bedrock of integrity, of family, of doing what is right. She paused, letting her gaze sweep over the audience, a benevolent queen surveying her subjects. It's so important to protect that legacy from outside influences. Her eyes flickered toward our table, toward me, for a fraction of a second. To ensure that every dollar goes to the right people, for the right reasons, and not to those who might see our charity as merely an opportunity. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Everyone in that room had read the gilded gossip piece. Everyone knew what she was implying. Chad, sitting beside me, went rigid. His hand tightened around his coffee cup so hard I thought the porcelain might crack. Eleanor looked out, her gaze triumphant. She had framed herself as the guardian of the family's virtue, and me as the opportunistic intruder. We must always be vigilant, she concluded, with a sanctimonious smile. Does anyone have any questions? The room was silent, save for the clinking of a spoon. It was a silence of complicity, of accepted truth. I slowly, deliberately, placed my linen napkin on the table. The sound was unnaturally loud. Every head at our table turned to look at me. Then, heads at other tables followed. A ripple of attention moved through the ballroom. I stood up. My black dress was a slash of darkness in the bright, glittering room. My heels made a sharp, decisive click-clack on the polished marble floor as I began to walk toward the podium. I didn't look at the crowd of 200 stunned socialites and power brokers. I kept my eyes locked on Eleanor. Her smile was still in place, but it was starting to look strained, like a crack forming in fine porcelain. I stopped next to her at the podium. She was taller in her heels, but I felt 10 feet tall. She looked at me, a flicker of confusion and then dawning alarm in her cold, calculating eyes. I gave her a small, icy smile, the one I used to give opposing counsel right before I entered a piece of evidence that would end their entire case. I leaned slightly toward the microphone, my voice dropping to a calm, confidential, and yet perfectly projected tone that forced the entire, silent room to lean in to hear. "Actually, Eleanor," I said, my voice clear as a bell, cutting through the tension like a shard of glass. "I have a question." I paused, letting the silence hang heavy and pregnant in the air. I could feel Chad's stunned gaze on my back. I could see the confusion on Charles's face, and I could see the first, real, genuine flicker of fear in Eleanor's eyes. "You see, everyone," I began, my eyes never leaving hers. "My mother-in-law seems profoundly concerned about my past, where I came from, what I did." I let a small, humorless smile touch my lips. "But she's been so busy worrying about who I used to be, she forgot to be careful about who she is now." I paused again, letting the implication sink in. She forgot who I used to be, and more importantly, she forgot what I used to do for a living. The silence in the ballroom was absolute. It was a thick, heavy thing, broken only by the faint, nervous rustle of silk and the distant clatter of a pan from the kitchen, a world away. 200 pairs of eyes were glued to me, a spectacle they had not paid to see. I had the stage. Eleanor, standing frozen beside me at the podium, had nowhere to run. I leaned into the microphone again, my voice calm, conversational, a stark contrast to the seismic tension in the room. "My question, Eleanor, is about the Bedford Falls Community Center renovation, the one the Vanderbilt Family Foundation funded so generously last year. A $3 million grant, if I'm not mistaken. It was your pet project, wasn't it? You championed it in the board meetings. You posed for the photos when the check was presented." Eleanor's face, which had been pale, now regained a shred of composure. This was her territory. Philanthropy. This she could talk about. "Why, yes, Anna," she said, her voice tight but trying for graciousness. She attempted to gently nudge me away from the mic, but I stood my ground, a rock in a black dress. "It's a wonderful facility. A true beacon for that community. I'm surprised you've taken an interest." "Oh, I have a deep interest in the details," I said, my tone deceptively light. "You see, in my previous life, before I was just a humble event coordinator, I was a corporate litigator. My specialty was forensic accounting. I spent 10 years following money trails that people much, much smarter than me had tried to hide." A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Chad, from our table, was staring at me, his mouth slightly agape. This was the first he was hearing of it. Eleanor's eyes widened imperceptibly. The first crack had appeared. "Is that so? How interesting. But I fail to see what that has to do with." "It has to do with a company called Apex Construction and Design," I interrupted, my voice sharpening, losing its pleasantry. "The sole contractor hired for the Bedford Falls project. A company that was incorporated, quite conveniently, just 2 weeks before the grant was approved. A company whose listed address is a P.O. box in Delaware, and whose sole officer of record is a man named Arthur Finley." The name meant nothing to the crowd, but it hit Eleanor like a physical blow. A tiny, almost imperceptible flinch. Her hand, resting on the podium, trembled. "Arthur Finley," I continued, turning slightly to address the room, playing to my new jury, "is a name I know well. He was the landscaper at the Vanderbilt estate for over 20 years. He retired 5 years ago to a very comfortable and very quiet life in Boca Raton. A life funded, it seems, by his sudden foray into the multi-million-dollar construction business." I turned my gaze back to Eleanor. "A business he seems to run entirely by mail, given that he's never once visited the Bedford Falls site." Charles, the foundation chairman, was now sitting forward, his face a mask of confusion and dawning concern. "Eleanor, what is she talking about?" "I have no idea," Eleanor blustered, her voice rising an octave. "This is slander. This is the desperate lies of a girl who did her homework." I finished for her, my voice cold and final. I reached into the small hidden pocket of my dress, a feature I'd specifically chosen for this moment, and pulled out a single folded sheet of paper. I didn't need a big file. I just needed the kill shot. The foundation's money was wired in 3 installments to Apex Construction. From there, the trail gets creative. But not creative enough. Not for me. I unfolded the paper, holding it up as if it were a piece of damning evidence in a trial. 70% of those funds were almost immediately funneled through a series of shell corporations, Granite Holdings, Elm Street Ventures, before finally landing in an account held by EV Design International, a boutique interior design firm based in Milan. I paused, letting the room lean in. "A firm owned solely by your maiden name, Eleanor. Eleanor Vance." The gasp from the crowd was audible this time. a collective, sharp intake of breath. Chad had his head in his hands. Charles looked like he was about to be sick. It was a brilliant scheme, really, I said, my tone almost admiring. You use the foundation's money, the family's money, to pay a phantom contractor you control, then have that contractor hire your own overseas company to do the work at a massively inflated cost. You pocket the difference. You were literally donating to yourself. The Bedford Falls Community Center got a cheap, shoddy facelift, and you got a new villa in Lake Como. All while standing up here, talking about integrity and legacy. The silence that followed was deafening. It was the sound of a reputation shattering into a million irreparable pieces. Eleanor was white as a ghost. She was shaking, her lips moving but no sound coming out. The perfect facade had not just cracked, it had vaporized. She looked out at the sea of faces, faces that had respected her, feared her, envied her, and now saw her for what she was, a common thief, a hypocrite of the highest order. You vicious little, she whispered, her voice a ragged tear. No, Eleanor, I said softly, my voice carrying through the mic. I leaned in, close, so only she and the microphone could hear my final words. I'm not vicious. I'm thorough. You tried to destroy my character with gossip. I destroyed yours with facts. You brought a spoon to a knife fight. I turned my back on her, the ultimate dismissal. I walked away from the podium, my heels clicking with the same finality on the marble. I didn't look back. I walked past the stunned tables, past Charles, who was stammering into his phone, and straight to my husband. Chad looked up at me, his eyes a whirlwind of shock, betrayal, and a horrifying dawning understanding. I held out my hand. Let's go home. He stared at my hand for a long moment, then at the crumbling spectacle of his mother at the podium, now being surrounded by angry trustees. He looked back at me, at the stranger he had married, at the woman who had just nuclear bombed his entire world to save her own place in it. Slowly, he took my hand, and we walked out of the ruins together.